Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we plunge headfirst into the stories behind the things you think you know. And today, well, we're unearthing one of the most famous, yet maybe one of the most enigmatic and misunderstood of the seven wonders of the ancient world.
Ah, the Colossus.
Exactly. You probably have a picture in your mind of the Colossus of Rhodes, maybe? That iconic image, standing with legs apart, towering over the harbor entrance as ships sail majestically between its bronze feet.
The classic image, yeah.
But what if I told you that image is completely, utterly wrong? And honestly, that's just the beginning of the real story, the true story we're aiming for in the Colossus of Rhodes revealed.
It's funny, that striking image you mentioned, it is powerful, but it's like a romantic fiction that popped up much, much later. So today, yeah, we're going on a deep dive that goes way beyond that popular myth. This isn't just the tale of a giant statue. It's really a journey into a city's incredible struggle for survival against just overwhelming odds. And it's a fascinating look at ancient engineering debates that, people still argue about today, and also an examination of a legacy that literally transformed how we think about freedom in the modern world.
Wow.
So our mission basically is to explore the whole geopolitical pressure cooker that forged this thing, the frankly astonishing engineering behind how they built it, the really dramatic story of its fall, and then how it just kept influencing culture through the centuries, right up to, believe it or not, the Statue of Liberty.
Okay.
And for this deep dive, yeah, we've drawn really heavily from this comprehensive report called The Brazen Giant, Colossus of Rhodes Revealed, plus a whole stack of other articles and research notes that help peel back those layers of legend to get to the full history.
Excellent. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's unpack this and set the stage. Our story kicks off in a world just turned completely upside down, total chaos, after Alexander the Great died back in 323 BC.
Right, a huge turning point.
His death was sudden, unexpected, no clear heir ready to take over, and his massive empire, this thing stretched from Greece all the way to India, just fractured. It plunged into decades of really brutal infighting.
Yeah, the wars of the successors.
Exactly. His top generals, the ones we know as the Diadochi, that's Greek for successors, they immediately started scrapping for power, carving out their own kingdoms from the pieces of Alexander's empire. It was just a time of constant shifting, alliances, betrayals, huge ambitions, really shaped the whole Hellenistic era that followed.
And each one of them, these Diadochi, they saw themselves as the rightful heir. Right. They were ready to fight tooth and nail to prove it.
Absolutely.
And in this, really chaotic landscape, two of the biggest players, the most powerful and frankly ruthless, were Antigonus, the first Monothelmus, great name, he's the one-eyed, and his son Demetrius, who was brilliant and incredibly audacious.
The Antigonids.
The Antigonids, yeah. Father and son, they controlled Macedonia, big chunks of Greece, Asia Minor. And their goal was huge. Reunite Alexander's entire empire, just under their rule. They saw themselves as the natural successors.
Okay.
Their main obstacle, though, especially in the Eastern Mediterranean, the guy really stopping them from having total naval control, was Ptolemy I Soter, another one of Alexander's top generals.
Oh, Ptolemy of Egypt.
Exactly. He'd very smartly secured Egypt, which was wealthy and, crucially, pretty defensible. And from Alexandria's new capital, he set up this incredibly stable and powerful dynasty that ruled for 3 centuries. And they fiercely guarded their independence from guys like the Antigonids.
So caught right in the middle of these two massive powers, geographically, politically, you have this island republic, Rhodes. How on earth did a small island like that survive in such a dangerous neighborhood?
Well, Rhodes, it was in a truly precarious spot, but also strategically vital. It's located right at a crossroads of the ancient world, smack between Europe, Africa, the Near East. It wasn't just some island. It was a real maritime and commercial power.
Right.
They had a strong navy protecting their trade routes, a thriving economy built entirely on sea trade. The Rhodians were famous for their ships, their business sense, and they even had this really respected code of maritime law. They valued their independence fiercely, tried really hard to stay neutral in all these endless wars between the Diadochi. They knew taking sides could just ruin them. But their big problem was they had massive trade links with Ptolemy's Egypt.
Ah, so the Antigonids didn't like that.
Exactly. Made their neutrality look pretty suspicious to Antigonus and Demetrius.
Yeah.
And for them, the Rhodian navy was basically the last major hurdle to them, completely dominating the Aegean Sea.
Yeah.
So this strategic reality, plus Rhodes refusing to join them against Ptolemy, it made a direct confrontation pretty much inevitable, as historians say. Classic clash.
Okay, sick.
Independent economic power versus imperial ambition.
So the fuse is lit for this huge showdown.
Yeah.
305 BC, Demetrius, he's done conquering elsewhere, turns his attention straight to Rhodes. His father sends him to punish them, basically take them off the board as an asset for Ptolemy.
And he shows up with just a staggering force for the time.
Yeah, tell me about it.
An army of 40,000 men,
Right.
a massive fleet, 200 warships plus transport ships, to blockade the island completely. I mean, to get a sense of scale, that's like a modern army corps focused on one single city. It's almost unheard of back then.
Wow.
And he brought the absolute latest, most terrifying siege tech the ancient world had ever seen. This was the golden age of Poliorketica, the art of siege warfare, and Demetrius. He was considered the grandmaster.
And the star of his show was this legendary machine, right? The Helepolis.
The Helepolis, yeah, the taker of cities. And what's fascinating here is this wasn't just like a big battering ram or a simple tower. No, this was basically a multi-story mobile fortress on wheels, an engineering marvel.
How big are we talking?
Ancient sources say it was an iron-plated tower.
Yeah.
Get this, 125 feet or 38 meters tall, that's taller than a modern 10-story building, and 60 feet, 18 meters wide. It weighed something like 360,000 pounds, about 160,000 kilos.
Unbelievable. How did they even move it?
Exactly. Imagine the logistics.
Yeah.
It had 9 stories inside, each packed with catapults, ballistae, things that could chuck boulders and giant arrows at the walls. And yeah, moving it. It took literally thousands of men just to push and steer this monster into position against the city walls. It just shows Demetrius's ambition and, the tech they had back then.
It's almost mind-boggling. So what was it like for the Rhodians facing that? How did they possibly hold out for a whole year?
Well, they were facing, an existential threat. Their response was nothing short of heroic, incredibly resourceful. For a full year, Demetrius just hammered Rhodes, land and sea. He tried everything. Built a second harbor outside the city to get his ships closer, launched these floating booms with archers, battered the walls day and night.
Relentless?
Totally. At one point, his troops, helped by the Helepolis, actually broke through a section of the walls. But the Rhodians, amazing resilience, civic unity, they fought like hell on the breach, pushed them back, and then somehow managed to repair the wall overnight.
Incredible.
The city just held on. Survival depended on their navy, their clever defenses, and just the sheer grit of the people enduring starvation, constant bombardment. The turning point finally came when a relief fleet sent by their ally, Ptolemy in Egypt, showed up.
Ah, the cavalry arrives.
Pretty much. It disrupted Demetrius's blockade, threatened his supply lines. So facing this incredibly long, costly fight with no guarantee of success, Demetrius was basically forced to negotiate a truce and just abandon the siege in 304 BC. And in his rush to leave, realizing the huge cost of failure and needing to move on, he left behind his entire siege train, all the expensive gear, including the Helepolis itself. A monument to his ambition, yeah, but also his ultimate defeat at Rhodes.
So it's this failure at Rhodes that's really central to how we interpret Demetrius's famous nickname, Poliorcetes, the besieger of cities. It's fascinating how that one name, Poliorcetes, became such a sort of battleground of perception itself. What does that tell us about propaganda and image back then? How were these narratives shaped around a king's reputation?
That's a great point, because the debate over that nickname really is a window into the propaganda wars of the Hellenistic age. You have one major historical tradition, starting with Plutarch, the Roman biographer, suggesting the nickname was ironic.
Like a sarcastic jab.
Exactly. A form of derision, because he failed to take Rhodes, his biggest, most public siege. So he was the besieger, sure, but pointedly not the taker of the city that really mattered. It highlighted his big failure.
Okay.
However, there's a growing view in modern scholarship that challenges that. It argues the nickname was actually well-deserved, given in genuine recognition of his incredible skills. This view gets support from contemporary historians, like Hieronymus of Cardia, who actually served in the Antigonid court and, would have wanted to put a positive spin on things.
Right, his own PR guy.
Pretty much. And proponents of this view point out, look, Demetrius successfully captured over 40 cities in his career. He wasn't just about brute force. He innovated in logistics, amphibious attacks. The sheer scale of his engines revolutionized warfare. So the Rhodes siege, even though he failed to take the city, could be seen by contemporaries as the absolute peak of military tech, a show of power few cities could have resisted. So whether besieger of cities was praise or mockery really depended on who was telling the story and why.
So, given Demetrius's reputation, especially for sieges, How big a deal was this failure at Rhodes for his image? Was it a real propaganda loss?
Oh, absolutely. It was a huge
Yeah.
propaganda defeat, precisely because his whole power and prestige were built on that military reputation, particularly his siegecraft.
Mm,
I mean, they called him the besieger.
right.
So for him to fail at Rhodes after throwing so much at it, it was a public embarrassment his rivals would have jumped on. Well, his own court historian spun Poliorcetes as proof of his amazing skill and how tough Rhodes was. His rivals, the Ptolemies, and especially the Rhodians themselves, they would have shouted the failure from the rooftops, reframing the name as a badge of shame.
Mm.
And in that light, yeah, the Colossus of Rhodes can absolutely be seen as the ultimate Rhodian counter-propaganda. It wasn't just a statue. It was this permanent, massive statement, visible to everyone sailing the Aegean, saying the great besieger of cities met his match right here. It was a physical bronze symbol declaring, "You failed, Demetrius, we won."
What a brilliant move. So, to celebrate this hard-won freedom, show gratitude to their god Helios, who they believe saved them, the Rhodians decide to build this unprecedented monument. But how did they possibly pay for something so enormous, especially right after a devastating siege?
And here's where the story gets really neat, a moment of just perfect poetic justice. The Rhodians, being incredibly practical, gathered up all that abandoned siege equipment Demetrius left behind.
All the stuff he used to attack them.
Exactly. Not just a few swords. We're talking the bronze plating and iron frame of the Helepolis, countless catapults, ballistae, all sorts of war engines. They collected it all and sold it for the massive sum of 300 talents of silver.
Wow. How much is that?
Well, a talent was about 60 pounds of silver, so we're talking 18,000 pounds of silver. A staggering fortune back then, enough to fund armies, let alone a statue. One modern estimate puts it around $4.5 million today, but in ancient terms, its buying power was way, way more. But what's really fascinating here, it wasn't just the money. It was this moment of profound symbolic alchemy. The actual tools of war Demetrius brought to destroy their city were literally transformed into the money to build a monument celebrating their survival and Helios's protection.
Wow.
The physical stuff of the threat, the bronze, the iron, was recycled into the means to create a physical symbol of their victory. This perfect ironic twist, turning the aggressor's power into the victim's resilience, it's just such a crucial part of the Colossus's origin. It establishes the statue not just as art, but as a monument forged directly from war, its very materials starting as weapons meant to destroy its home.
So their city's saved, the project's funded by the enemy's own weapons. The Rhodians then hand this massive job of creating their statue to one of their own, a sculptor named Chairs from the Rhodian city of Lindos. Now, Chairs wasn't just some local artist, right? He came from a pretty prestigious background.
Absolutely. His artistic lineage is key here. It puts the Colossus right in the mainstream of high Hellenistic art. Chairs was a student of the famous sculptor Lysippos,
Alexander the Great's personal court artist.
the very same. Lysippos was a true master of bronze, renowned for pushing sculpture forward. He introduced this new, more slender look for the human body, moving away from the chunkier classical style. He was also big on naturalism, capturing movement, emotion really well. His work changed sculpture.
Okay.
And crucially for the Colossus, Lysippos already had experience with huge scale. He'd made a 22-meter-high, that's 72-feet bronze statue of a seated Zeus for Tarentum in Italy.
Ah, so there was precedent.
Exactly. That earlier work by Chairs' teacher provided a direct model and probably invaluable technical know-how for the even bigger project in Rhodes. So picking Chairs meant the Rhodian monument would be cutting-edge, artistically and technically, steeped in the best traditions of the Alexandrian world. It was going to be a rival to the big royal commissions. Not just big, but sophisticated.
Incredible. So construction starts in 292 BC, takes 12 years, finishing in 280 BC, and the final scale was just staggering, really cementing its place as one of the seven wonders. Just how big was it in the end?
Yeah, the ancient sources are actually pretty consistent here. They say 70 cubits tall. Now, a cubit varied a bit, but scholars generally figure that's about 32 to 33 meters, or 105 to 108 feet, just for the statue itself.
Okay, how does that compare today?
Well, it made it easily the tallest statue of the ancient world. It was roughly two-thirds the height of the modern Statue of Liberty, from her feet to her crown.
Wow.
But that's just the figure. It stood on this massive white marble pedestal, which accounts suggest was maybe 15 meters, or 49 feet high. So the whole monument together was pushing 50 meters, nearly 160 feet tall. Some modern studies even argue for a bigger three-tiered pedestal, potentially making the whole thing even taller, maybe 160 feet total. It was just immense for its time.
Truly staggering. And how was it built? What materials did they use to make something that huge stay standing?
It was a marvel of composite engineering, really, designed for both looks and stability. The outside, the gleaming skin, was made from thousands of individual bronze plates, shaped, polished to catch the sun, and then fixed onto an internal skeleton.
Like a frame inside.
Exactly. A framework of strong iron bars and beams, like a lattice tower. Strong but relatively light.
Huh.
And then, the crucial part for stability, especially against aging winds and earthquakes, Rhodes, is on a fault line. Remember, the hollow inside of the statue was progressively filled with large stone blocks as they built it up.
Ah, like ballast.
Precisely. It gave it immense weight and, critically, a low center of gravity. Turned the hollow shell into an almost solid, resilient mass. We don't have exact figures, but one source estimates it used something like 13.6 tons of bronze and 8.2 tons of iron. So much metal it supposedly caused a bronze shortage across the ancient world during those 12 years. Imagine just getting all that bronze and iron to Rhodes.
This raises that big question, the one people still debate.
Right.
How exactly did they build such a massive, complex statue almost 3 centuries before Christ? No modern cranes, no computers.
That really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it pits this one ancient account against modern archaeology and engineering. The biggest technical debate around the Colossus is exactly that.
Yeah.
How is it actually put together?
Right.
The only detailed ancient description we have comes from Philo of Byzantium. He was a writer on mechanics, paradoxes, probably lived in the 3rd century BC, might have even seen the statue standing.
Okay, so what did Philo say?
In his book, On the Seven Wonders, Philo describes this really unique, very dramatic construction method. He claims chairs cast the statue in situ, right on its final spot, building it from the ground up.
Oh.
According to Philo, after the feet were cast and set on the marble base, chairs built this huge earthen ramp, like a mound, all around the completed section, basically burying it. Then he'd cast the next section horizontally on top of the mound, using the flat top as his new workspace. He kept repeating this: cast a section, build the ramp higher, cast the next section until the whole 33-meter statue was done, encased in this man-made mountain.
Wow.
Then at the very end, they cleared away all the earth to reveal the finished wonder, like it was being birthed from the ground. Philo's reason: he claimed the cast bronze sections were just too big and heavy to move or lift any other way.
Philo's story is definitely captivating. A god emerging from a mountain of earth. But does it actually make sense from an engineering standpoint?
Well, for centuries, people mostly just accepted Philo's story. But modern archaeologists and engineers, they've raised some serious objections. They argue Philo's description is technically just not plausible and doesn't match up with anything else we know about sophisticated Greek bronze working.
What are the main problems?
There are quite a few. First, there's zero archaeological evidence for that gigantic earthen ramp Philo talks about. Building it, and especially removing tens of thousands of cubic meters of earth afterwards, would have left some kind of trace, you'd think. None's ever been found. Second, Philo's claim that large bronze sections couldn't be moved. Demonstrably false. Hellenistic builders regularly moved and lifted massive stone blocks for temples that were way heavier than any likely bronze piece of the Colossus. They were masters of levers and cranes. Third, his account kind of skips over essential steps in casting, like making a full-scale model first, which you'd absolutely need for proportions and fitting pieces together, or using a clay core inside the bronze, vital for hollow casting something that complex.
So if Philo's method is unlikely, what's the alternative? How do experts think it was really built?
Right, so instead of Philo's dramatic ramp, scholars now widely believe the Colossus was built using the standard Greek technique for large bronze statues, just scaled up massively.
Yeah.
That technique is sectional hollow casting.
Sectional hollow casting, how does that work?
Okay, so first you'd create a full-scale master model, probably out of wood or clay. Then, from that model, you make individual molds for large sections of the statue, like, say, a forearm, a piece of the torso, a lower leg.
Yep.
These sections would then be cast separately as hollow bronze pieces in a foundry. And we've found evidence of ancient bronze foundries on Rhodes, plus a huge casting pit in Athens from the same time, big enough for massive body parts. Casting them hollow was key, saved a ton of expensive bronze, and made the pieces much lighter than solid ones, crucial for stability and assembly.
Okay, so they cast the pieces elsewhere. Then what?
Then the finished bronze sections would be transported to the actual monument site. They'd be hoisted up using sophisticated cranes and levers, which we know they had, and carefully riveted together around a pre-built internal iron frame and the stone ballast filling. Imagine the precision needed to get, say, an arm section to line up perfectly with the shoulder section hundreds of feet in the air.
Wow, yeah, complex.
Very. But we have precedents. The Athena Primachos on the Acropolis in Athens, another huge bronze statue, was known to be cast in pieces and assembled on its pedestal this way.
So this whole technical debate really highlights something important, doesn't it? We need to read ancient sources like Philo in context. He wasn't writing an engineering manual. He was writing paradoxographia, basically, literature about marvels meant to amaze the reader, the armchair tourist.
Exactly. And in that context, his story is brilliant. The narrative of a god slowly born from a man-made mountain, it's way more dramatic, more wondrous, more fitting for a wonder of the world than the, practical reality of workshop assembly and riveting. He clearly prioritized literary effect, that sense of awe, over strict technical accuracy.
So comparing them directly, Philo's got in situ casting on an earthen ramp, claiming pieces were too heavy to move. Modern reconstruction suggests sectional hollow casting in a foundry, pieces moved and assembled on site using an iron frame, scaffolding, cranes, a method backed by other archaeological evidence.
Precisely. It's the difference between a captivating legend and what was likely the complex practical engineering reality. And for a deep dive like this, understanding that difference is, well, it's crucial.
Okay, now let's tackle the big one. The image everyone knows. The Colossus standing legs apart, straddling the harbor entrance, ship sailing between its feet. It's the image. But let's just hit this head on. This incredibly powerful vision, seen in countless engravings, movies, even souvenirs. It's completely fictional, right?
Oh, absolutely. Complete fiction. And it's a surprisingly late invention, too. That whole romantic idea only dates back to the late Middle Ages or the Renaissance. The first time anyone mentions that straddling poses around 1395 in an Italian pilgrim's account that's over 1,600 years after the statue was built.
Wow, that late.
Yeah. So modern scholarship universally rejects it, and there are really compelling, conclusive reasons why, based on engineering, logistics, and what the ancient writers actually said.
Okay, break it down for us. Why is it impossible?
Reason one, basic structural engineering. Looking at the materials and techniques they had back in the 3rd century BC, a hollow bronze statue that big, that heavy, just could not have supported itself with its legs spread that wide. The stress, the tension, especially on the ankles and the groin area, would have been immense. It would have buckled and collapsed under its own weight. The bronze would deform, the iron frame would snap. Couldn't happen.
So, not just unlikely, physically impossible with their tech.
Pretty much. Reason two, logistics. Remember, Rhodes was a huge maritime power. Its whole economy depended on its harbor. The idea that they'd close off their main harbor for 12 whole years just to build a statue in the entrance, it's unthinkable. It's economic suicide.
Yep.
Cripple their trade, their navy. No way they'd do that.
Okay, makes sense. What's the final nail in the coffin for the straddling myth?
The ancient accounts of its destruction. When that huge earthquake hit in 226 BC, the writers who mention it, like Strabo and Pliny the Elder, are very clear. They say the statue snapped at the knees and fell over onto the land.
Onto the land.
Exactly. Now, if it had been straddling the harbor when it collapsed, it would have created this catastrophic blockage, right? Tons of bronze and stone rubble falling into the main channel, effectively corking the harbor. That would have been a massive disaster for a port city like Rhodes. Yet no ancient writer ever mentions such a blockage. The fact that everyone agrees the ruins lay on land for centuries where people could see them confirms it must have stood entirely on land to begin with. The straddling myth is dramatic, yeah, but it just flies in the face of all the evidence.
So, with the harbor entrance definitively debunked, that leaves us with the big mystery. Okay, where did it actually stand? You mentioned there's no conclusive archaeological proof, no foundation saying Colossus stood here, so scholars have to piece it together.
Right. It's detective work using textual clues, logic, the layout of ancient roads, and this has led to basically 3 main theories, each with pros and cons.
What's the first one?
The first, often called the more touristic idea, places it on a mole, like a breakwater, at the entrance to the Mandrake Harbor. That was the main military and commercial port. It's near where those 2 bronze deer statues stand today, a modern symbol of Rhodes.
Okay, why there?
Well, it fits vaguely with ancient mentions of it being near the harbor entrance. The downside, it still has some of the straddling problems of a collapse might still partially block things, and it's not the most sacred spot or the highest point for visibility. Plus, does it really fit with the ruins being entirely on land, not washed away? maybe not perfectly.
Okay, theory number 2.
A second, more scientifically favored theory puts it further inland, up on the hill where the medieval palace of the Grand Master stands now, within the old city walls.
Ah, higher up.
Yeah. The main advantage here is that a collapse from that high ground would definitely send the ruins falling onto land, well clear of the port. That fits perfectly with the accounts of the fallen statue being a tourist site for centuries. It also gives it more visibility.
Okay, makes sense. Is there a third?
There is. And here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The most detailed, comprehensively argued theory comes from a scholar named Robert Cabrick. He argues the Colossus stood at the absolute highest point of the ancient city's Acropolis, a promontory we call Monty Smith today.
The Acropolis? Why the...
Well, Cabrick lays out several strong arguments. Symbolically, it makes perfect sense. You'd place the statue of your city's protector god, Helios, on its most sacred ground, right next to the temples of the other main city gods, Athena Polius and Zeus Polius. The spiritual heart of Rhodes.
Okay.
Visually. From up there, nearly 300 feet above sea level, it would have utterly dominated the skyline. Visible for miles and miles out at sea, overlooking all 5 of Rhodes' harbors. A constant, towering reminder of Rhodian power and divine protection.
So not just a symbol, but maybe functional too. Could it have been like a lighthouse?
Exactly. That's another part of the theory. From that height, a polished bronze surface gleaming in the sun, or maybe holding a torch at night, it absolutely could have served as a gigantic navigational aid, a counterpart to the pharaohs of Alexandria, another wonder, guiding ships safely into Rhodes.
Fascinating. Any other advantages to the Acropolis location?
Yeah, practical ones too. It's the highest point, so it'd be the safest place for what was essentially the ancient world's tallest lightning rod, drawing strikes away from the city below. And the foundation would be on solid limestone bedrock, the best defense against earthquakes in that very shaky region.
It sounds like a really strong case. Is there any downside?
The only real downside, and it's the same one all the theories share, is the lack of definitive archaeological proof of its base. We haven't found that smoking gun foundation yet, but still, the combined symbolic, visual, practical, and safety arguments for Monty Smith make it, for many scholars, the most convincing theory.
Okay, so if we can't be 100% sure where it stood, what about what it looked like? How do we reconstruct the appearance of this sun god that awed the ancient world?
Right. While the exact spot and pose are debated, we can actually reconstruct its likely appearance with pretty good confidence. We use the art styles of the time and surviving images from Rhodes itself.
So what would it have looked like generally?
Artistically, it would have been pure Hellenistic sculpture. Almost certainly a standing, nude male figure that was standard for depicting Greek gods like Helios, showing ideal heroic form. And for stability, especially with earthquakes, the posture would likely be quite calmer, legs fairly close together, not lunging or striding dynamically. That would have been too unstable. It needed to feel solid, steadfast.
Makes sense. What about the head? You said we have clues there.
Yes, the head is the part we're most certain about, thankfully. We have lots of coins minted in Rhodes around that time, plus surviving relief sculptures and other art from the island. And they all consistently show Helios in a very specific way. He has a youthful, idealized face, lips slightly parted, this magnificent curly hair, kind of wild like the sun's rays. But the most distinctive feature, the key identifier, is the radiate crown. Pointed sunbeams shooting out directly from his head.
Ah, and that iconic crown symbolizing the sun's power. That's the direct ancestor of the one on the Statue of Liberty. You can see the lineage.
Exactly. It's an amazing visual link across millennia. Now, the arms. That's a bit more speculative. Ancient accounts aren't totally clear, and art varies.
What are the possibilities?
Well, one popular idea is he held a torch high in one hand. That fits perfectly with the lighthouse theory, right? Guiding ships at night. Another option, more traditional for God, is holding a spear, symbolizing power and protection, with the other arm down.
Okay.
And then there's a really intriguing third option, suggested by a relief carving found in a Rhodian temple. It shows Helios shading his eyes with his right hand, like he's gazing out to sea.
Oh, that's interesting.
Isn't it? It's both naturalistic and really thematic for the sun god, eternally watching over his city in the sea lanes, vigilant. So whatever the exact arm position, the overall image was this powerful, gleaming bronze god, a monumental sentinel watching over the city that built him in gratitude, a visible prayer, a statement of protection.
So this magnificent sentinel, the Colossus, its reign was tragically short. You said it only stood for about 54 or 56 years. After 12 years of intense work and resources, just a blink of an eye really, what brought it down so quickly?
Yeah, its time as a standing wonder was incredibly brief. What brought it down was a massive cataclysmic earthquake in 226 BC. Some ancient sources give slightly different dates, maybe 224, 222 BC, but around that,
Rhodes is in an earthquake zone, right?
very much so. It sits right on the Hellenic Arc, a major tectonic boundary, so powerful quakes are unfortunately part of its history. And this particular earthquake was devastating. It didn't just destroy the statue, it wrecked large parts of the city, the harbor, commercial areas, huge damage, loss of life.
And the statue itself, how did it fall?
The ancient accounts are quite specific, painting a vivid picture. It didn't just crumble, it apparently snapped at the knees and then toppled over, crashing down onto the land below with what must have been an almighty roar.
Snap at the knees.
Yeah, that detail suggests the weakest point was probably the ankles and knees, bearing all that immense weight from above. The violent shaking just proved too much. It buckled right there. The Titan had fallen, broken, but still immense.
So in the aftermath, help was offered. I remember reading their ally, Ptolemy, stepped up.
That's right. Ptolemy III, Yorgis of Egypt, maintaining that close alliance, made this incredibly generous offer to pay for the Colossus to be completely rebuilt, which really shows you how famous the statue had become almost immediately, and how important Rhodes still was, that a foreign king would offer to fund such a massive project.
But they didn't rebuild it, did they? Why not?
No, they didn't. And what's fascinating here is why. Despite the money being offered, despite the statue's importance, the Rhodians, being deeply religious and probably profoundly shaken by the earthquake, decided they had to consult the great Oracle of Delphi first.
Ah, the most important oracle.
Exactly, the highest religious authority. You didn't ignore Delphi lightly. And the oracle's response, it was a clear, absolute no. The priests delivered this warning that rebuilding the statue would actually bring more misfortune down on the city.
Wow. So they thought they'd offended Helios.
That seems to be how they interpreted it. They came to believe they had somehow angered their patron god, maybe with the statue's sheer hubris at scale, and that the earthquake wasn't just random nature, but divine punishment. So, respecting the oracle's veto, they turned down Ptolemy's generous offer and never tried to put their wonder back up, defying the gods. Too risky.
So what happened to the ruins?
Well, this is the strange, captivating part. For the next 8.5 centuries, think about that, from 226 BC all the way to 663 AD, the colossal ruins just lay there exactly where they'd fallen.
800 years.
Yeah. And it wasn't forgotten rubble. It actually became one of the ancient world's top tourist attractions. People traveled to Rhodes specifically to see the wreckage, to gaze in awe at the sheer scale of it, even broken. It was a monument to ambition and to nature's power.
Did anyone write about seeing it?
Oh, yes. Pliny the Elder, the Roman writer, visited in the 1st century AD. He wrote in his Natural History that even lying down, it excites our wonder and admiration. He mentioned that few men can clasp the thumb in their arms and its fingers are larger than most statues. He even described seeing the vast caverns inside the broken limbs where you could see the stone ballast.
Incredible.
Strabo, the geographer, also mentioned seeing the ruins lying on the ground, broken at the knees, so the fallen Colossus remained a wonder, a spectacle reminding everyone how fragile even the greatest human creations are.
Now, the final end of the Colossus, what happened to all that bronze? There's this one famous story, right? But you said it's suspect. From Theophanes the Confessor.
That's the one. It's a single, dramatic, and highly suspect account. It comes from Theophanes, a Byzantine monk writing around 817 AD, nearly 170 years after the events he's describing. That time gap alone is a bit of a red flag.
Okay, so what's his story?
Theophanes claims that in 653 AD, an Arab naval force led by Muawiyah Heat, who later founded the Umayyad Caliphate, raided Rhodes. And as part of the loot, his men supposedly gathered up all the ancient bronze bits of the Colossus that had been lying there for centuries, melted them down, and sold the scrap metal to a Jewish merchant from Edessa.
And isn't there that detail about the camels?
Yes, that's the famous picturesque bit. Theophanes adds that the merchant needed 900 camels to haul all the bronze away. It's a very vivid image, emphasizing the huge quantity.
So why is it suspect? It sounds like a plausible end.
Well, while it's colorful, historians are extremely skeptical for several reasons. First, Theophanes is the only original source for this story. Every other mention you find later just copies him, no independent confirmation at all. Second, the core idea that this huge, valuable pile of bronze just sat there untouched for over 850 years is highly improbable. Bronze was a strategic metal, always needed for coins, weapons, statues, tools. The Romans, the early Byzantines who ruled Rhodes for centuries, Surely they would have repurposed it long before 653 AD. It was just too valuable to leave lying around.
Yeah, that doesn't quite add up, does it? Leave tons of valuable metal sitting there for almost a millennium.
Exactly. And beyond the practical issues, the story itself fits almost too neatly into the anti-Arab and, to some extent, anti-Jewish propaganda common in 9th century Byzantium when Theophanes was writing.
Ah, a propaganda angle.
It seems likely. The story of this revered ancient monument being destroyed by invading Arabs and sold specifically to a Jewish merchant plays into negative stereotypes of the time. It casts the Arabs as impious destroyers. It's similar to other likely fabrications from that era, like the story of Arabs burning the Library of Alexandria, another tale probably designed to make them look bad.
So the real fate was likely less dramatic.
Far more likely, yeah. Historians like L.I. Conrad argue Theophanes' account is probably legend or propaganda, not fact. The true fate of the bronze was almost certainly gradual scavenging and recycling over centuries, piece by Rhodians, Romans, Byzantines, long before Muawiyah's fleet ever arrived. The 900 camel story. It's memorable, captures the imagination, but it's also certainly legend, not history. Speaks more to myth-making than reality.
So the Colossus. One of the last of the seven wonders to be built, along with the Lighthouse of Alexandria, but also the most short-lived, standing for only 50-something years. Yet its impact was clearly immediate and huge. It made it onto those lists of wonders compiled by writers like Antipater of Sidon, even after it had fallen. That says something about the impression it made. How did it really stand out among legends like the pyramids or the Temple of Artemis?
That's a great question. When you compare it to the others, the Great Pyramid, an ancient tomb, the Hanging Gardens, maybe legendary, maybe real, but horticultural. The statue of Zeus at Olympia, a sacred cult statue. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, a massive religious sanctuary. The Mausoleum at Halicarnassus, another grand tomb. The Lighthouse of Alexandria, mostly utilitarian. The Colossus really does occupy a unique space.
How so?
Well, the pyramid and the mausoleum were tombs, right? Honoring rulers, about the afterlife, royal power. The Temple of Artemis, the statue of Zeus, pure religious sites, centers for worship. The lighthouse, while dedicated to a god, was primarily civic engineering for navigation. The Colossus, though, it uniquely blends these things in a really political way. Yes, it was an offering to a god, Helios, but its direct motivation was the celebration of a specific military victory kicking Demetrius out and the political independence of the Rhodian polis, their city-state.
So it was more than just religious.
Much more. It wasn't a monument to a king. It was a monument to the collective will, the resilience, the achievement of a republic, funded by the spoils of war they won defending themselves. It stood there as this permanent, visible statement of their triumph over an imperial aggressor.
So you could say it was the most overtly political of the seven wonders.
Arguably, yes. It was this powerful statement of self-assertion by a Hellenistic city-state against the massive monarchies surrounding it. A symbol of defiance, republican pride, and divine favor, all rolled into one huge bronze package.
And even though its physical form disappeared, the idea of the Colossus just kept echoing through Western culture for centuries. You mentioned Dante's Inferno, referencing it.
Yeah, Dante has this giant old man of Crete, symbolizing humanity's decay, with a broken foot, clearly alluding to the fallen Rhodian statue. The image persisted.
But its most significant, most tangible legacy that stands today in New York Harbor, doesn't it? Tell us about that incredible connection to the Statue of Liberty.
It's a direct and acknowledged line. Federico Guispartoldi, the French sculptor who designed Lady Liberty, was explicitly inspired by the ancient Colossus. He took the idea of its colossal scale, the personification of an abstract concept, liberty, instead of the sun god and its placement as this guardian figure at a major harbor entrance. The whole concept of a giant symbolic figure at a nation's gateway. That comes straight from Rhodes.
Amazing. And the connection was cemented by that famous poem, right?
Absolutely. By Emma Lazarus. In 1883, she wrote her sonnet, The New Colossus, to help raise funds for the statue's pedestal. And that poem, now inscribed inside the pedestal, has become inseparable from the statue's meaning. What's fascinating here is how Lazarus deliberately invokes the ancient statue, only to contrast it with the new one.
How does she do that?
She starts with those famous lines. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. She's directly referencing the incorrect straddling image of the Rhodes Colossus, the symbol of power, maybe even conquest. Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch, whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. See the contrast. The original Colossus was born from war, a symbol of military victory, defiance, national strength. Maybe even a warning against outsiders.
But Lazarus flips it completely.
Totally. It's a masterful act of ideological transformation, a profound rebranding. Her new Colossus isn't a conqueror. She's a compassionate mother of exiles. Her torch isn't a weapon. It's a beacon of worldwide welcome. Her gaze isn't defiant. It's compassionate, looking out for the huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse.
Wow.
Lazarus takes the ancient concept of a colossal harbor guardian and completely inverts its meaning. From national strength and exclusion, it becomes a symbol of universal hope, welcome, and refuge. It's maybe the most powerful example of how an ancient symbol can be reimagined for modern ideals.
And the idea of the Colossus, that potent image, it still inspires people today. Haven't there been proposals recently to actually build a new one in Rhodes?
Yes, several times over the last few decades. These really ambitious proposals pop up, ranging from trying to reconstruct it faithfully based on scholarship to creating highly modern interpretations with museums or cultural centers inside the statue itself.
What's the thinking behind that?
Well, supporters argue a new Colossus could be this powerful symbol of, say, global unity or peace, bridging ancient and modern times. Plus, undeniably, it would be a massive tourist draw, bringing huge economic benefits to Rhodes, maybe even bigger than the original.
But there must be criticisms, too.
Oh, definitely. Critics raise serious questions. Historical authenticity: can you really reconstruct something when we're not even 100% sure where it stood or exactly how it looked? There are worries about Disneyfication, turning deep history into just a theme park attraction, and, of course, the immense cost. Could that money be better spent on other things the island needs?
So, for now, it remains an idea.
For now, yes. The Colossus remains physically a monument of the past. Its future reconstruction is uncertain, but its memory clearly is very much alive and kicking.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, it's incredibly clear the Colossus of Rhodes was so much more than just a really big statue. It was this complex cultural artifact born from a very specific violent moment in history. It was a monument of defiance, wasn't it? An engineering marvel we still debate how they pulled off, a tourist attraction even when it's rubble, and a symbol so potent its meaning could be flipped and reused 2,000 years later. Its story really is a kind of microcosm of that whole Hellenistic world, the gigantism, the tech innovation, the intense propaganda, the cities asserting themselves against kings. It captures so much of that era.
Absolutely, and I think ultimately the enduring power of the Colossus lies precisely in its absence, because we don't have definitive remains, no confirmed location, no single certain image. It exists most vividly in our imagination. It's become this timeless metaphor, hasn't it? For huge ambition, for human ingenuity pushed to the absolute limit, but also for the inherent fragility of everything we build, even the greatest things when faced with time and nature. The story itself, the one we've pieced together from conflicting old texts, archaeology, engineering analysis, and centuries of just artistic fancy, it's a powerful reminder that history isn't just a set of facts we uncover. It's an ongoing process, right? Critical reconstruction, interpretation, maybe even filling in some gaps with educated guesses. The brazen giant might have snapped at the knees and vanished into scrap metal, but its shadow stretches long and unbroken across the centuries, still inspiring that sense of awe, that contemplation.
So a final thought for you, our listeners. As you go about your day, what monumental ambitions are you pursuing, big or small? And what can the story of the Colossus, its rise, its fall, its enduring echo, teach us about both the potential legacy and the ultimate fragility of those ambitions?